The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Welcome back to another great episode of our Best Practices webinar series with SevenSignal. If you could, please let us know where you are logging in from today. I see a lot of you have actually joined us early. Where you're from, if you're working from home, if you are in the office today, let us know in the questions panel. I am working remotely from my apartment in Cleveland, and we are joined by special guest Lee Badman today. Lee, where are you joining us from?
I am joining you from the wilds of central New York, about 20 miles west of Syracuse.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we also have Jim Vada back again, joining us from Cincinnati. How are you today, Jim?
Very good. Up here in outside of Oxford, Ohio, north of Cincinnati, where it is closing in on 50 degrees and sunny.
Is it really 50 degrees and
really
sunny?
Is.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous. All right, well, thank you, Jim. I see a lot of you dropping in where you're joining us from. We have Roberto joining us from Winnipeg. Thank you, Roberto. We have Phil joining us from England today. We have Fernando joining us from Mexico City. Thanks for tuning in. And I see we have Keith from Tennessee tuning in today. So thank you to all of you. I see a lot more of you dropping in the chat here. We'll circle back later with you all as we get started and move forward. So we have a great topic here today, why Wi-Fi may not be the best wireless technology for BAS with Lee Badman, as we said, CWNE number 200. Thank you, Lee, so much for joining us again, back by popular demand.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, and as I said, we have Jim Vada here today on our presentation as well. And I'm Kelsey Rizzuto. I'm the marketing specialist here at SevenSignal. Really excited to dive into this. There's a lot to unpack here with this topic. So I'm excited to hear some feedback from the audience as we move forward here. A couple of announcements. For those of you who have recently joined us, all of these will sound familiar, but just to recap, we do partner with CWNP for every single one of our webinars. So by watching these webinars, you are eligible for CE credits. So if you're pursuing some kind of certification, no problem, just drop us a message or an email, and we can send over a certificate PDF for you per request. We also send out a SevenSignal newsletter every 2 weeks. So for those of you who are subscribed, you should have received that newsletter this morning here. And with that newsletter, we love to provide some resources to the Wi-Fi community, engage some survey questions with what's going on out there, and really just like to connect with our fellow engineers. So our survey question from last newsletter that we got with some results here is actually really interesting. So we wanted to see are dropped calls and or spotty Wi-Fi connections interfering with you while working remotely. And as you can see, a kind of mixed response here, but majority say, yes, that is very true, which goes into a little bit more about what we're going to talk about today with the digital experience of working from home. Moving forward, we also do put on a product tour every single Friday at 12 noon Eastern. So we'll go ahead and drop that registration link here in the chat later on in the webinar. And if you haven't recently attended a product tour, highly suggest doing so. We have a lot of exciting updates recently with Mobileye, with Sapphirei, such as a recent portable Sapphirei sensor, some added enhancements to the Sapphirei over-the-air mode, and continuous updates with Mobileye as well. So go ahead and register and stay tuned and stay updated with all things SevenSignal. We also post all of our archived webinars to our YouTube channel at SevenSignal. So you can go ahead and watch today's broadcast later this afternoon. It'll be posted there. And you can go back and rewatch some of our previous topics that we've covered, and go back and rewatch some of those insights that we've covered in the past. A few more announcements here. We also post all of our slides to our Twitter account after each webinar. So go ahead and give us a follow at SevenSignal, and those slides will be up there later this afternoon as well. But if you aren't on Twitter, you don't have an account, that's no problem either. If you're interested in receiving those slides from today's presentation, you can drop us a message and we can send those to you via email, but you also will all receive a follow-up email as well with access to that. Another great reason to follow us on Twitter is that we give away a lot of merchandise to those who follow our account and to those who engage with our weekly trivia questions. So we have 2 lucky winners from last week with the same last name, surprisingly. So congratulations to Spencer Hunter and James Hunter. So congrats to you two. You should be receiving some merchandise in the mail soon. And to the rest of you on the line here today, stay tuned for our trivia questions and you could receive some SevenSignal swag. A few more announcements here. This is a little sneak peek of some recent ROI data from recent IDC research. And we'll actually be putting out a white paper for this very, very soon. So just wanted to give you some inside scoop and stay tuned for some updates with this. Another announcement here, this will sound familiar again to those of you who have recently joined us, but we've recently been featured in the Gartner 2020 Market Guide for Digital Experience Monitoring. We've been recognized as a representative vendor for Mobileye. Really proud, really excited about this, so we'll go ahead and drop a link to access this in the chat as well. So if you care to get some more information there, you can go ahead and click that link. All right, on with the show here. A little history on SevenSignal. We were established in 2007 in Helsinki, Finland, and we're now located in Cleveland, Ohio. We're really proud of the 1 billion data points that we're analyzing daily, in addition to the 5 million devices that we're monitoring daily. We have over 200 customers, over 30 partners, and 14 patents, which goes to show that the technology you see from SevenSignal, you are only going to see from SevenSignal. We are also certified in over 40 countries and are GDPR compliant, which goes to show that we take data and privacy incredibly seriously for all of our users across the globe. And as I said, we are SevenSignal, the leader in wireless experience monitoring. And we're here because no one has yet created that perfect network, that perfect access point, and the digital experience matters. And usually when you have a negative digital experience, it bubbles up to some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So what we're able to do is provide full visibility into the end user experience through an outside-in approach with our product suite of Mobileye and Sapphirei. We also remain completely AP and device agnostic, so those great tools and technologies that you already have installed on the network, we're incredibly complementary with as well. So as I said, the digital experience matters, and when you have a negative experience, it usually relates to one of these top 7 Wi-Fi problems, such as congestion, coverage loss, co-channel and radio interference, roaming issues, and more. So how we're able to detect those kinds of problems is by running active and passive tests on the edge of the network, looking for things like throughput, packet loss, latency and jitter, adapter and driver issues, and more, giving you a full perspective, holistic view into what is occurring in your network. So to give you a little more perspective as to what makes us so different is if you look at your typical enterprise LAN infrastructure on the right, you've got those great tools and technologies that I mentioned, giving you really useful data, such as your Riverbed, Cisco, Aruba, Appneta, SolarWinds, and more. But what we're able to do is pick up where they leave off with Mobileye, giving you full visibility into the end user experience through that outside-in approach that I mentioned previously. Mobileye can ultimately be installed on any mobile device, from your Zebra scanners, your mobile phones, your laptops, your workstation on wheels, and more. And Mobileye can be installed on any Mac OS, Linux, Android, or Windows device as well. So to complement Mobileye, we also have Sapphirei, which are the software-enabled hardware sensors for service level and quality and RF visibility. So through that combination, you're able to get that full view as to what is occurring in that network environment. Taking this one step further, for a lot of us on the line here, we're working from home today. So that office, enterprise LAN infrastructure that you had working in the office, it's not nearly as useful anymore. So So you need full visibility into your home networks. And with Mobileye, we're able to do that as well, giving you that visibility into your personal user experience. Whether you're working in an apartment, in your house, at some kind of coffee shop, etc., we're able to give you that visibility as to what's going on there as well. And as I've said many times, and I will say many times again, work from home is here to stay. Moving into the new year, this may look a little bit different, but some of us may be working remotely a few days a week and in the office a few days a week, and some of us may be working from home full time. So, having a good Wi-Fi connection isn't just nice to have when you're working from home. It's still mission critical, and it's still important to stay connected to your work no matter where you're logging in from. All right, as I mentioned before, we do trivia every single week, and we give away a lot of swag. So I'm going to go ahead and launch these questions that Lee provided us, and we'll see how everyone does today. All right.
Lee didn't pull any punches today.
No, he did not. So our first question here, which of the following is not an actual IoT technology? See a lot of you dropping in your answers here. I'll give you a few more seconds. And I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And Lee and Jim, how did we do here today?
I'll defer to you, Lee.
Well, unfortunately, the majority is wrong, and the correct answer is IoTNet is not right. But to everybody's credit, I have only recently learned of weightless myself. I'm not sure how prevalent it is out there, but it is a valid IoT technology. So IoTNet is the incorrect answer.
Yeah,
All
Symphony, yeah, weightless I've never heard of either. So not going easy on them today. I like it.
No, sir.
All right, awesome. Thank you to everyone who answered that question. Congrats to the few of you who got it right. We're going to go ahead and launch our second question here. Let's see how people do for this one. All right, everyone able to see this one too?
Yep.
Okay, which of the following is a well-established, if not somewhat quirky, protocol used in BAS systems? All right, I see a few of you dropping in your answers here. And I'll give you a couple more seconds before we close the poll. Okay, how did we do on this one, Lee?
All right, this one had better results. The majority prevails. To know BACnet is to hate BACnet. I mean, is to love BACnet, and 40% got BACnet correct.
Awesome. Well, congrats to all of you. Thank you, Lee, for those questions to get us kicked off for this presentation. So I am going to go ahead and pass the controls over to Lee here. And as I'm doing that, Jim, if you want to give a short introduction to our guest speaker today.
Yeah, happy to. And we're really excited to have Lee here again. If you don't know Lee Badman, he is the wireless network architect at a leading higher education institution here in the United States. He is CWNE number 200, and he is a frequent blogger. That's his personal blog there, wirednot.wordpress.com. But you might catch him in network computing and other publications too. So Lee, happy to have you here. Are you ready to go?
I am, Jim. Thanks
all right,
for
it's all yours.
Thanks for the intro, and thanks for having me. Unlike you, I don't have 50 degrees. I've got less than 30 and our first real snow going on today. So
wow, snow, jeez.
Going on for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. The opinions that you're about to hear are my opinions. They may not sit well with everybody, but my perspective is formed from basically doing wireless, big and small environments, doing local area networks, big and small environments, and doing a lot of industry observation and analysis, and as you pointed out, writing and working with different vendors, and thankfully mixing with a lot of people who know a lot more than I do about a lot of topics. And munge that all together, and I'm about to offer you my perspective, and be curious to see if anybody agrees, disagrees, but hopefully it's at least thought-provoking today. So the topic at hand, building automation systems, that's the BAS part, BAS, and Wi-Fi. A perfect match. And I won't read you every bullet, but I will, while you're digesting them, I will say, boy, wouldn't it be nice if all client devices were a good match for any network. And that's just not the case. We know that's not the case, especially in wireless. Unfortunately, it's often an assumption made out of ignorance by people that plan out these systems. And it's not to say, it's not to throw dirt when I say it's made out of ignorance, but, ignorance is lack of knowledge, not, maliciousness or stupidity. Sometimes people just don't know, and Wi-Fi is so out there, it's just seen as the natural fit for almost everything. But, those of you who are listening, who do wireless, that that's just not the case. At least it's not easily the case in all cases. So, and it's our job as professionals to push back when appropriate. That's a little bit about what we're gonna get into today. Like I said, Wi-Fi is a great target. We should use it for everything. It's ubiquitous. It's bought and paid for. We've got Wi-Fi, and the vendor says that Wi-Fi is the right fit. Well, it's common knowledge that Wi-Fi is, wildly popular, but over time, I'm of the opinion that a lot of aspects of the overall paradigm have just been bungled. Depending on what you're trying to do beyond basic client access, it's kind of a bit of a fragmented mess, and a lot of the parties that should be working together for interoperability and, to make it so that you can use Wi-Fi for everything, just aren't talking to each other. So the whole notion of interoperability and, we've got standards. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if, the promise was actually realizable, if that's even a word, but it's just not the case. And again, just opinion, the one agency that should be making all of this stuff a lot more tight when it comes to interoperability, I think they've kind of lost sight of what that even means, and we won't name them, and I'll get off my soapbox. So let's treat ourselves to a definition. When we talk about building automation systems, what are we talking about? Hopefully my dogs aren't too loud. They're on the other floor of the house here, so I apologize for them. Building automation system, by definition from facilitiesmanagement.com, and there are slightly varying definitions. We're using interlinked networks of software and hardware to monitor and control a building's mechanical and electrical systems, including HVAC, lighting, security, and fire systems. So that's the focus that we're talking about today when we talk about building automation systems. That's our definition. So we'll get into this with a couple of examples, but let's lead up to that with some introduction here. Why not Wi-Fi for building automation systems? Well, building automation system vendors, those creating the systems, not only do they often not get enterprise wireless, they often don't get Ethernet, unfortunately. Wi-Fi is its own technology. And again, here we're talking enterprise. Let's not lose sight of that. At home, everything is different. Smart home is not so much building automation for this discussion. So please keep in mind that that word enterprise needs to kind of pop to the forefront of your mind. And we're talking big environments, business environments, multi-site stuff controlled from one home, whatever, data center, IT team, whatever. But enterprise is what we're talking about here. You know, and we're finding that in the enterprise, we're outgrowing Wi-Fi. We're finding that Wi-Fi, although it's convenient, again, for client access, it just doesn't scale. It doesn't fit. The control mechanisms might not be right. Even at its best performance, you know, latency might be, you know, something that we can't control for, you know, whatever the system is that we need to work to really work in that environment. So, you know, again, I won't read you every bullet here, but I do want to take you down to the bottom when we talk about interference. Anybody who's gone through CWNA, anybody who's gone through wireless security, one thing that we can't defend against on a wireless network is interference. The only thing that we can do is move our devices. That's one thing that we're, you know, beyond the interference source. And how practical is that? If somebody pops up something that's laying waste to the RF, you know, we don't have any real defense against that other than to monitor and report on it and then go find it. And that alone kind of brings up some major concerns for systems that are actually controlling what's going on in a building, especially when you get into, you know, security and fire control and all of, or fire warning and all of that. So again, just priming the pump here with these bullets, and then we're gonna, you know, get into it a little bit more. So I'm making the case that building automation systems are going to be better suited as IoT clients versus Wi-Fi clients. And talk a little bit more about IoT in a minute, but you know, a little bit of why I'm saying that is these devices, again, you know, this is where you're going to find them. They're not your typical Wi-Fi clients looking for access, looking to use the network and be productive. These are different. We tuck them away in oddball mechanical spaces. You know, in those spaces, we're not usually or frequently charged with, you know, putting Wi-Fi really wall-to-wall, edge-to-edge in a building. So they're, you know, the dark corners where we don't do Wi-Fi are a lot of times where these devices end up. Ideally, a lot of them are battery powered because there is no AC available, or they shouldn't have to use AC because AC is very costly to run. You know, a lot of times you have to pop these things in weird places. You know, a lot of times they're more asleep than they are awake. They're headless. You know, I already talked about the protocols. In particular, BACnet is one I'm familiar with. It can just be a headache for everybody, even people who are really good at doing it when you start to scale it up. And often, you know, when I talk about isolation from the rest of the network in that third bullet, a lot of times that's, you know, logical isolation, physical isolation. They're fragile, they're ill thought out, they don't play well with friends, whatever description you want to throw on it. A lot of times they need to be kind of set aside in unique ways versus your typical Wi-Fi client. So talk about alternatives, specific alternatives to Wi-Fi for building automation connectivity. Again, if we're not using Wi-Fi and wired isn't practical, we get into the world of IoT and low power WAN. And, you know, this is not a space that a lot of us, or at least a significant portion of those listening, I'm guessing, have had to dive into yet. I know for myself, I've gotten enough working knowledge to know that there are better alternatives to Wi-Fi, and, you know, I've worked on some specific projects where absolutely going in this direction is a much better fit than Wi-Fi, and we'll see, you know, some of the reasons why that is the case as I proceed here. But you know, the alternatives, even if these names don't mean anything to you, the examples here, the specific IoT technologies, you know, we're going to have to learn more about them as Wi-Fi people if only to know when to recommend them, because you can see disaster coming if you try to funnel everything through Wi-Fi. And it might sound odd for Wi-Fi people to say don't use Wi-Fi. It might sound odd for any professional to, you know, give work away, if you want to think of it that way, but it just, you know, isn't always the right solution. So more suitable radio technologies for the purpose. And again, I'm leading up to a couple of examples of, you know, better options than Wi-Fi. So we've only got, you know, less than an hour to talk about all of this stuff. And I will say to you that, you know, IoT as a concept is just huge. Thankfully, there's a lot of good free courses out there to get you started on just grasping what it means. I will say that there is a lot more to it from a scholarly and critical thought perspective and a you know, greater understanding perspective when it comes to IoT than just thinking they're not computers, they're not phones, they're other things that join the network. You know, that's probably as much as many of us have thought, but when you start getting into it, there's usually a cloud component, and there's usually some analytics, and there's usually some if this, then that stuff going on. It's absolutely fascinating stuff to dip your toes into, even if you never really embrace or have to put out any of these competing systems. The concepts are something that you really want to learn about. Even if just, you know, from a fundamental, at a fundamental level, and we just can't get into it here. So we're going to leave IoT, you know, at a purposefully simple level when we talk about the rest of what we need to cover. So nothing makes the case better than an example. You know, let's dive into some real world examples that I've seen here, or that I've seen on my end, things that I've been involved with. I'm going to put up a diagram here in a minute and all of that. But in this scenario, the people that are doing this project, they had the goal of taking an 8-plex housing unit with eight individual units to monitor air temperature, air quality, you know, before building improvements. Then the building gets retrofitted, and then they want to remeasure, and they also want to monitor power consumption before and after, and they want to do that to see, okay, what did we gain when we retrofitted this building? And it's a research project to begin with, but some of the, you know, that's the basic goal is spelled out, but they also want to take it out of a controlled environment out into public housing. And, you know, not only are they looking for energy savings, but know what technologies on the retrofits work and what don't, and know what monitoring systems for what they're doing work and what don't. So, you know, the project planners, when they kick this thing off, you know, Wi-Fi is the easy example. Yep, we got wireless, and, you know, vendors say that we can use Wi-Fi for what we're doing. Like, yeah, how's that going to work? Well, you got to take this one sensor and get it on the network, and it needs an AC power cord. And okay, well, what network stuff does it support? Well, it just supports wireless. Okay, you're deploying it where we have an 802.1x network. Does it fit on that? I don't know what that means. It's like, and you can see the discussion. Like, well, you're assuming there's an AC power cord everywhere you're going to stick one of these things. Well, we'll just have one put in. Okay, let's get a price on doing that in this fortress-like building where you want to be. And the reasons why, you know, even just the facilities reasons become pretty obvious why this isn't a good idea. But the other part is, in these buildings, it's a residential building, and, you know, we all have our own residences, and we all have our own Wi-Fi. And those of you who are in multi-dwelling apartments know that that can be rough. And those of you who have ever tried to help a family member get past, you know, what the neighbors are doing and all of that, or, you know, even what your own kids do sometimes, it can be terrible. So just not the right solution. So again, I promised you a floor plan. We'll see that in a minute, but just to lead up to that, we're going to see a closet at one end of this building. It's approximately 200 feet long. It's all block walls. It's 2 stories. In this case, the Wi-Fi is managed, but where they're looking to take real world deployment of this system eventually, the wireless won't be managed. So, you know, if you've got an 8-plex, picture 8 different people responsible for getting their own connectivity, 8 different Wi-Fi networks walking on each other, unless neighbors team up or whatever. But, you know, a fairly clean and managed environment where you're going to have good RF, you know, maybe that's got some appeal up front, but it's not where they're going in the real world, which, you know, alone is notable. And you want to prepare for the worst up front is my perspective. And where I live, where this is taking place, not only is cabling a nightmare, there's all kinds of low voltage permits needed if you're going to run cable. There's asbestos remediation in these old buildings. Even if there's no asbestos, any place you're going to do a wall penetration has to be analyzed to see if there is. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, safety and environmental and, you know, red tape kind of stuff in a bunch of different directions. So, and like I said, you put the AC, if you can find an AC outlet, there's nothing to prevent a resident from unplugging it when they want to put in something that they see of a higher priority in the thing. So, and oh, by the way, these sensors are very high importance. So, you know, all of this is like the background to where we're going and why Wi-Fi is just not the best fit. So here's what the building looks like. Little visual is always helpful. And again, it is a 2-story. I can only show you 1 floor in this diagram. But you can get a sense of, okay, if I got 8 different families or 8 different individuals living in this apartment building, and I got to run cable from that closet all the way down to the end, that's a lot of walls to penetrate. You know, you just get like I said, a visual for where this is all happening. And those are very, very thick block walls. This all was built in the 50s or 60s. And for some reason, they had a lot of cinder blocks to use. Somebody did very well on the cinder block contract for these buildings. So again, I'm saying Wi-Fi would be wrong. It would be the wrong infrastructure for this scenario. The Wi-Fi sensors would be the wrong clients. The protocols that they want to use over Wi-Fi potentially could absolutely be wrong. And when I talk about wrong, as many of you know, sometimes that means you can make it work, but supporting it is going to be an absolute nightmare over time. Doesn't mean it can't work. It just it's just going to be painful. By contrast, a better fit for this particular environment, and this is what they did end up going with, technology called LoRaWAN. It is one of the leading IoT technologies at this level for what it's trying to do. You know, again, think of it as an alternative to Wi-Fi, if that's all you know about it. And unlike Wi-Fi's 2.4 and 5 gig use, we're into 800 meg. So if you were to go back to those block wall buildings in your mind and think about 5 gig trying to penetrate buildings and penetrate walls and be reliable, 800 meg does a lot better. You know, think about any of the low frequency cordless phones you've ever had that just go, you know, sometimes far into your neighbors' houses where they can, you know, listen in on you because they were not built with encryption or whatever. And the lower frequency you get, the farther you go, the better the propagation, blah, blah, blah. You know, back to our RF fundamentals. So that alone makes this a better technology in some ways. We can see that we can use our battery power versus wall power. They're going to be low profile sensors. Chances are these are going to be a lot less obtrusive than something that's Wi-Fi based that needs to be big enough for our radios and the antennas and all of that, and then actually have some performance. There's only so much trade-off you can do with a Wi-Fi device and shrinking it and making it effective. But more importantly, again, back to what they're trying to do over the long run, these are going to work regardless of what the individual apartment residents do. So if there's 8 chaotic, crazy wireless environments all fighting each other, and oh, by the way, I'm sorry, up front on that thought, if you've got 8 different networks, how do you get your sensors onboarded onto 8 different networks is another part. This takes all of that confusion away. Regardless of what goes on in those apartments, this technology will work regardless of the, involving the users and saying, hey, I need to stick this on your Wi-Fi network. So in this case, the sensors are in the apartment, the batteries last years. We put the gateway in the telecom closet, and there's your simple diagram showing the way that this works. The gateway is the only thing that's actually on the internet. The gateway can either be cellular, it can be Wi-Fi if appropriate, or it can be Ethernet connected. In this case, we're going with Ethernet connectivity, and then it goes out to the cloud, and all the data is being gathered out there in cloud land, and all the analytics run and all of that. But so really, the LoRa versus Wi-Fi, everything from the cloud to the left is where we're talking about the changes. You could do everything from the cloud over to the right, regardless of what you have going on in the apartments. Let's just be clear, I'm saying the stuff on the left, this is a better fit for the overall model than Wi-Fi. And hopefully the case has been made. And the benefits of what I'm talking about hopefully are obvious, doing it one way versus the other. So that is one real world example playing out right now on my end. Let's talk about another one. Again, if you go back to the definition of building automation systems, right? So we're monitoring, we're controlling, doesn't have to be both, it could be one or the other. We're doing HVAC, that's kind of what was shown in the 8-plex example, or lighting, or any number of other systems. So in example number 2, we're talking about lighting specifically. A company called Lutron is a pretty big commercial lighting provider. They've got some really good stuff, and then they've got this product line, which in my opinion should just be retired and be done with it, and just take it off the table so people can't make mistakes. What you're looking at is just a screenshot. I know it's probably not obvious with that weird bar across the middle, but this is a screenshot of their documentation right out of the Vive or Vive, whatever the Vive, however you pronounce that, right out of their support docs. Well, gee, this is news. A corporate Wi-Fi network can interfere with the Wi-Fi on the Vive wireless hub. Where a corporate Wi-Fi network exists, it's recommended to do the following. Connect the wireless hub to the corporate network using the Ethernet connection on the hub and disable the hub's Wi-Fi. I can't think of very many corporate environments that are not going to have Wi-Fi. Hence, this thing should not even be on the market, in my opinion. Too easy to spec it wrong. Nowhere is this information that you're looking at really called out prominently. You got to kind of dig around to find out that you could be making a poor choice if you get into this. I know for a fact that some people are going to buy it and then find out, and then the remorse starts. It's like, what I planned on using it the way they built it. Now Lutron, well, I'll save that for a minute. I'll save my next thought about Lutron. Again, not throwing dirt on them. They've got some really good stuff. And they do have viable alternatives to Vive. It's just Vive or Vive is the specific offender here. So what happens if you buy into the wrong system? What happens if you buy into Lutron's Vive? Well, you're looking at real world scan taken off a Cisco controller of one of these lighting controller hubs. The whole paradigm is the hub has wiring, non-Wi-Fi, proprietary wiring off of the hub, off to a bunch of different lighting controls. You connect to its AP functionality with a smartphone or whatever and manipulate the system. And then, like they say in their manual and their documentation, well, if you got Wi-Fi nearby, or if you've got Wi-Fi in your environment, you really should connect it up to Ethernet. But you don't have to. Nobody's making you, and this thing will sit there and blast away as long as you do not connect to Ethernet. And unfortunately, this is just one of a few that basically went in wrong. They have no Ethernet connectivity, and for years they've been blasting away on a poor channel selection. So we know that if we're on channel 10, not only are we interfering with channel 11, but also channel 6. And if you jump over to the right, you can see the signal strengths with which the other APs that are the corporate APs are seeing this. This thing is a flamethrower. Give you a little bit of decoding of the AP name, the second column. If you look at the middle value, the 500, 600, 130, the leading number is the floor. So 500 is the 5th floor, 600 is the 6th floor, 130 is the 1st floor. This is a single hub that's throwing signal on channel 10 pretty much on every single floor of this 6-story building. I don't even remember where it is. If I had to look at the signal strengths in the right-hand column and guess, I'm guessing that this is probably on the 4th floor, but it's making its presence known with enough signal to offend on floors 1 through 6. So again, the point here being, this is a building control system using Wi-Fi that's just going to wreak havoc, and it is wreaking havoc. There's places where 2.4 is probably useless in this building. You could say, well, most clients do 5 gig anymore, so what does it matter? Well, if you go forward with Wi-Fi 6 and such, 2.4 is very much with us for quite a while. So building in yet another problem is not really a good choice. So, this is kind of Lutron's shame. And it kind of goes back to that dysfunction, and people aren't talking to other people about, how do we make this fit in the real world? Lutron does have another system, Clear something. It works in 400 meg, and it's beautiful. It interferes with nothing. And a lot of times where you see the fancy lighting on big skyscrapers that changes colors, and it can basically be programmed to symbolize different things, red, white, and blue on the Memorial Day or whatever, or something great happens with a sports team and you can light up a building in their colors. That tends to be controlled by Lutron's other system, or one of the few competitors that does that stuff. Fascinating technology, wonderful stuff, if you make the right choice. And again, you can see here that that this was not the right choice. So get to the end of it. Hopefully I didn't rush too much. No, I think we're going to time out fairly good here. Again, as a Wi-Fi professional, sometimes it feels odd to sit in a meeting and talk people out of using Wi-Fi And depending on where you are in the Wi-Fi space and what your job, job duties are and job description is, it can be really uncomfortable to steer people away from Wi-Fi because for a lot of us, that's how we make our living. But again, I am here to tell you that it's time to start mastering some of the other stuff. CBRS is out there, IoT, as I mentioned before, it's its own thing. We have to be able to look beyond Wi-Fi, even though, for us, it is the thing that we love, and it's the thing that puts food on our table and all of that. It is absolutely not the end all. Every standard comes out, promises more and more. And arguably, I won't say it delivers less, but the promises are getting more grandiose for what we're supposed to be able to get out of each standard. And then we all find out a year or two later that we have to turn off 3/4 of the promised features, or the clients that are going to use the network don't work. It's just a mess. A lot of the people that do use Wi-Fi in these systems are still putting out 802.11b, 802.11g. And you can make the case that 2.4 gig has better range, but at the same time, you can't expect network administrators and network designers to embrace clients that are going to slow the network down and that are just built crappy, and that you have to adjust the network in very unpleasant ways to penalize the majority to fit these oddball devices in. And again, it's just not the end all when we talk about 802.11 anymore. Not all deployment cases are the same, as I mentioned there. Sometimes you can do stuff with Wi-Fi and it's going to work under the heading of, BAS, but you have to know what other tools are available. It's up to us to read a situation and potential problems and not get bullied into making bad choices. I've kind of preached a little bit, so I won't go on about, why we need to familiarize with alternatives. But there are times where, Wi-Fi is just flat out wrong, absolutely flat out the wrong fit. And you need to present a good case and stand your ground for everybody's benefit, even if it costs more to add another system beyond the existing Wi-Fi. Those costs, if you go with Wi-Fi, you're going to end up with a whole bag of other costs over time for support and rework and user frustration and all of that. So, saving a little money up front, the old expression about, is it stepping over dollars to pick up pennies or whatever? Somehow that fits, at least in my mind, but apply that in some way that makes sense to you, even though I'm bungling it. But basically, when it's wrong, damn it, it's wrong, and it's up to us to point out why. And if we can help arrive at the right solution, everybody wins. And with that, when I look at my clock, hopefully there's time for questions, discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee. I think we do have time for a couple questions. One comment before we jump in. When I've looked at the specs of some of those systems, they really would be better suited with wireless IoT protocol than Wi-Fi. The specs almost prove that, because they're using 802.11b or 802.11g, and it's 2.4 gigahertz only, of course. So they're telling you they don't need good performance because they're using radios that don't support higher data rates and a lower performance band, probably because they want it to be low cost as well. So all of those things are, better addressed with IoT, the IoT protocols that you showed us today.
Yeah, and to that point too, I didn't even really touch on security. I've seen some of these that need TKIP, or WEP, or even WEP. I mean, that's how dated they are, and it's like, back to the bending of the network policy and rules and doing things you don't want to do to make it fit. Or there's a a wired component to that system and a Wi-Fi component, and they have to be on the same subnet, and that subnet can't be bigger than a Class C, or whatever the the datedness of it all, and the non big view of networking that these things are often built with, is really surprising sometimes, just how bad they can be.
Yes. So a couple questions here. Mike asks, how cost effective is implementing something like CBRS for a BAS system?
Well, it's a great question. I have yet to see BAS client devices. I know that there are bridges that'll give you, CBRS on one side and then do what you want on the other side. I'm not so familiar with specific clients that directly can use CBRS yet. At the same time, CBRS, you're going to need less APs. For people who don't know what CBRS is, it's the 3.5 gig private LTE, private 5G, blah, 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 on go, all of this stuff that's becoming more popular. Companies like Solona, and I believe, so I'm trying to think of somebody else. I'm not playing favorites, but I'm also trying to move the conversation, so I don't want to twiddle my thumbs while I think of other vendors. But that's where we're at when we talk about CBRS. You need less hardware, you need less infrastructure to cover the same amount of area. You'll be able to cover a lot more low bandwidth clients with the cellular approach to things. So architecturally speaking, if you have clients that support it, it could be very cost effective.
And maybe one last question here, Kelsey. Lee, this is from Nick, and he says, can any of the non-Wi-Fi wireless protocols utilize enterprise authentication systems, Radius, Active Directory, etc.? I'm trying to understand how to begin to integrate such protocols in an enterprise environment. That could probably be a webinar all on its own.
Yeah, well, great question. I can't even fake that I have a responsible answer, but I do know if you go back to, well, let me take that back. I do know that if you go back to like the LoRaWAN and the parts that are going to connect to either your LAN or your Wi-Fi network. So, LoRaWAN sensors are talking to the gateway on 800 megahertz. So that connectivity is going to be very proprietary. It's got its own security stuff built in. So you're not going to want to do anything, 802.1x or enterprise security between the sensors and the gateway, I don't think is even appropriate to contemplate. But now the gateway needs to talk to the network, and you can certainly do 802.1x port-based authentication on network switches. So there's a case where you can say, okay, our security is how the gateway interfaces with the network, and our policy is, it's got to be 802.1x to go on Wi-Fi, and if the gateway doesn't support it, it can't connect via Wi-Fi. It can only connect via a switch, and on our switches, we can do 802.1x security, in that regard. So maybe that kind of gets near what Nick is asking.
Yeah, I think so. I would just add, CWNP has this new CWICP exam and material that really gets into the weeds of some of these protocols. Because they do each have their own authentication schemes, most of which really aren't like EAP based auth that we do with 802.11, and have their own quirks. But one thing I found, working with IoT stuff, on the security side is the traffic it generates is pretty predictable. So like you can actually go back to the old like 1990s methods of writing ACLs about what IP addresses can connect to other IPs, and that can be a way to help build some security into your IoT deployments as well.
Yeah.
All right, Kelsey.
Nope. Sorry,
yeah,
Jim.
Lee. Sorry, did you have another comment?
I was going to say, I do know that as you evolve your thinking into IoT alternatives to Wi-Fi, I know it can be hard to let go a lot of what your brain is trained to do, but even the security paradigms are going to be different. You know, everything about it is like, you know, go into it with an open mind and don't try to funnel, you know, even your security approach. You may end up coming back and find that, you know, okay, what we did over here does work over here as well. But, you know, you really do also have to just kind of free your mind and figure out how do we use this new beast, and it may not fit into the security mold that you're used to. I'm seeing that in some ways already, and like I say, just know that it's a new day, and be open to, you know, whatever you got to do to make these things work. And I don't think that the overall overarching methodologies have even completely evolved, and a lot of good use cases will come out, and you know, somebody will hit on, okay, this is the silver bullet for 80% of this type of deployment, blah blah blah. But I don't think we're there yet, and a lot of this is particularly for BAS systems.
All right.
All right, thanks, Lee. I think that's about it. Kelsey?
All right. Well, that concludes today's presentation. Thank you, Lee, for joining us again. We're always happy to have you back on the webinar here, and I know our audience enjoys it as well. And thank you, Jim, for joining us again today. And finally, thank you to all of you for giving us 45 minutes out of your workday to really dive into this topic. I know we had a really great discussion here, had some great questions, and we hope to see you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Lee. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.